Culture can be a beautiful thing, as we witnessed recently in our Night Among the Nations. Just a couple of weeks ago at SMBC, we gathered to celebrate wonderful aspects of culture. Delicious food, stories that teach values, crafts and games exhibiting creativity, and dancing filled with joy. And I dare say, we have the best dancing principal in the ACT. But culture, like all aspects of human existence, has been corrupted and contaminated by sin. Unfortunately, this is the aspect of culture that we too often, only focus on. But Scripture teaches us to engage in, not flee from our culture. As followers of Jesus, we're to be in the world, but not of the world. Kirk's culture spots and Mark's public Christianity spots are teaching us how to understand and engage constructively in our culture. This morning, I would like us to consider some cultures across the globe and to have our hearts encouraged that God is indeed omnipresent, omnipotent, and at work through his servants. In 1867, Lars Skresford, a Danish missionary serving in India, discovered a people group living in a region north of Calcutta called the Santal. Lars wondered how long it was going to take for him to get through to the Santal, since they had previously had no known exposure at all to any Jewish or Christian people or any teachings of the Bible. As Lars started to learn the language, he was amazed to discover that they had stories about Thakur Jiu, the genuine God. This genuine God, according to the Santal, created the first man and the first woman and placed them far to the west of India. An evil being named Lita tempted them to make rice beer and to pour out part of the beer on the ground as an offering to Satan. Then they drank the rest of the beer and fell asleep. When they woke up, they noticed they were naked and they felt ashamed. They also had a story about Thakur Jiu destroying the earth with a flood, but spared one husband and wife. When Lars started to proclaim the gospel message to the Santal, they responded with great excitement, because long before Lars had arrived in India, God had prepared the hearts of the Santal by preserving stories within their culture, which caused them to resonate with the storyline of the Bible that they were hearing from Lars. Let's travel from India to South America, where nearly 100 years later, in 1961, at the ripe age of only 19 years old, Bruce Olson walked into the jungle of Colombia to find the Motolone Indians. On his first encounter with the Motolones, he was shot in the leg with an arrow. Not exactly the warm welcome you would hope for. But Bruce persevered through this and many other hardships to win the trust of the Motolone, to learn their language and their culture in an effort to share the good news of Jesus with them in a way that they would understand. The stories and the legends of the Motolone were complex and perplexing to Bruce. That caused him to realize that concepts that he wanted to bring to them, like grace, substitutionary atonement, and the incarnation, would be equally complex and perplexing to the Motolone. One day, as he and several Motolone men were walking through the jungle together, they had a lively discussion, and one man shared about the Motolone legend that said a prophet would come carrying a banana stalk, and that God would come out of those stalks. This made perfect sense to them, but they didn't know how to explain it to Bruce, who was obviously very confused. Finally, one of the Motolone, named Bobby, cut off a section of a banana tree and tossed it on the ground. Another Motolone struck it with his machete and split it in half. Bobby said, "This is the kind of banana stalk that God could come from." Obvious, right? Bruce looked at the cut banana stalk, and he started to notice that the inside looked like pages of a book. So he excitedly took his Bible out of his pack and he flipped through the pages and said, "This is it! This is it! This is God's banana stalk!" That legend had prepared the Montolone to want to hear stories that were contained in God's banana stalk and to give credibility to the message of the Bible. Bobby became the first believer among the Montolone, and through his witness, many others came to faith. Contemporaries of Bruce Olson, serving on the other side of the globe, were Don and Carol Richardson, who in 1962 moved to Irian Jaya, now called Papua, to live among the Sawi people. When Don shared the gospel story with the Sawi men and got to the part of Judas betraying Jesus, one man whistled a bird call of admiration. Several men touched their chests with their fingertips in awe. For the Sawi, Judas was the hero of the story. Don was confused, discouraged, feeling hopeless. He went on to learn that for the Sawi, the prized trait in a man was the ability to fatten a person up with friendship and then to kill them while they were totally unsuspecting of the deception. Judas embodied this prized character trait by being with Jesus and 11 other disciples for 3 years before he betrayed Jesus to his death. Well, this seems like a very dark cultural value indeed. What do you reckon? How in the world were the Sawi people with this background ever going to grasp the good news of grace? The Richardsons finally went on to discover there was only one way out of this endless cycle of deception, killing, revenge. It was the cultural practice the Sawi called the peace child. In this practice, two tribes who were at war with one another, deceiving one another, when they wanted to make peace, they would exchange a young male infant from one tribe to the other. And that infant would be raised by the other tribe. The peace child would be touched by every man in the village, and anyone who touched the peace child was bound not to work acts of deception and violence against the other tribe as long as that child lived. Once that child died, they could go back to their deceptive ways. Well, once Don learned of this practice, he used it to show them that God wanted to live in peace with them and with all of mankind, so he gave his only son as the peace child. And the good news is that this peace child never dies. And so we could be assured that we can always live at peace with God if only we would touch God's peace child. Ecclesiastes 3:11 tells us God has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart. God, in his mercy and in his desire for all peoples across the globe to be in relationship with him, has placed in and preserved in every culture aspects of that culture that can help people understand his good news of salvation. So let's all strive to be good students and exegetes of culture so that we can more effectively share the good news of Jesus with others.